Welcome back to One Piece Explained. The manga has finally returned and there is a ton to talk about in this chapter. It's been a pretty busy past few days, so unfortunately this breakdown will be a little shorter than usual, but hopefully it'll still be enjoyable. So that said, let's get into it. We start off with our 19th entry into Yamato's cover story as the team stops by at the quarry. Having first been introduced to us as a prisoner mine, this place has now been reclaimed by the people of Wano, and Udon Castle is now being reconstructed. I don't believe that we've actually seen Udon Castle before during any of the flashbacks, so this is pretty neat, and I'm expecting this to be where the new daimyo, perhaps Raizo, will reside. You'll notice the shrubs and greenery in the foreground. This was the result of Admiral Ryokugyu's presence in the region when he went to round up all of the remnants of Kaido's forces. It's unclear what became of that, especially after his interaction with Shanks, but he did request a battleship to take back the pirates before that event. We at the very least saw King bandaged up in an undisclosed location during Vegapunk's broadcast, so it's possible that some of the Animal Kingdom pirates are out there in the world, perhaps some even having stayed behind in Udon. I'm excited to see where this cover story goes next, but now let's talk about chapter 1132, Adventure in Elbaf. This chapter picks back up near the coast of Elbaf as the giant ship, the Great Eric, approaches the island. I like that we can still see the damage done to the boat from the clash on Egghead, with this back part of it having been destroyed when Luffy and Bonnie sent Saturn flying away. You'll recall that this bar on the edge of the island is the same one that the Red Hair Pirates were frequenting in the last arc. We revisit the barkeep and the young child we first met back then, as we learn the boy's name to be Colin. The barkeeper's apron also seems to read war, in reference to the Kingdom of Orland. She gives Colin a basket of food for his father and someone named Ripley. We can't really say for sure who that is just yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's just his brother or something along those lines. It's also not totally clear to me if the barkeep is intended to be Colin's mother, given how she calls his father daddy, but it could really go either way. Now we get some really cool new technology in the series as the Giants create a large rainbow before the Straw Hat's very eyes. It seems this is the product of the Painters, the sunstone that was first mentioned by Hyrule and Stanson in the last chapter. At the time, it was not really clear what they were referring to, as all we knew was that it could not have been used because of the snowy conditions, and that it was likely some sort of device to allow for travel or navigation. As mentioned in the last breakdown, sunstones were real devices theorized to have been used in the Viking Age around the regions of Iceland. Oda has also added a fantastical twist on them by incorporating the concept of the Bifrost, the rainbow bridge that connected Midgard and Asgard in Norse mythology, except here it can be used for sailing. It's also fun to note that this is not actually the first time that we've seen Dory and Brogy create rainbows before, as they were able to produce them with their tears back on Little Garden. This whole scene is of course very reminiscent of the Straw Hats sailing up the Knock-Up Stream to get to Skypiea, though this time around it's mostly the half of the crew that wasn't there for that adventure, aside from Robin of course. As we'll learn a bit later on in the chapter, there are island clouds around the upper layers of Elbaf, so there's some really fun potential for connections there. Not only that, but Bonnie's dream of visiting a sky island could be fulfilled with this arc as well. Lilith has an interesting line here about having seen this before. While we know she has never left Egghead, she does know Vegapunk's memories from his visit to Elbaf after the events of Ohara. As the Great Eric makes its way over the rainbow, Stanson and Hyrule sail up alongside them. Now this doesn't look like to be their pirate ship, the Naglfar, but instead a smaller sailing vessel. It's nice to see that the two recognize Frankie, but I am eagerly awaiting for it to be revealed to the Straw Hats that Stanson was the giant from Sabaody that they helped free. Now one last bit is that someone or some people on the giant warrior pirate ship seem to be singing Binks' Brew. This is a popular song in the world of pirates, but its relevance in Elbaf is a bit interesting. Of course, Luffy picked up the song from his time with the Red Hair Pirates who have a connection to the island, but the children from the House of Lambs were also aware of it, so in the event that they learned it from the people of Elbaf, there could be some greater underlying connection at play. Now going back into the island, we find Luffy having left Loki and jumping onto the bridge where he meets Gerd and Goldberg running with the Thousand Sunny. The two quickly try to clear up the misunderstanding and apologize for Odo's actions, as we learn that Gerd also has a soft spot for humans, but in a much less twisted and creepy way than Rodo. When Goldberg asks Luffy about his presence in the underworld, Luffy freezes up and gets a bit nervous. As we know, Luffy is historically not a great liar, but luckily the giants don't dig too deep. Now, whatever deal Luffy ended up making with Loki is pretty curious. We just had learned that Loki had some information about Shanks and was trying to leverage that against Luffy in order to free himself. I wonder if this is really as straightforward as it's being made out to be, or if there's some other deal that Luffy ended up agreeing to. Loki is clearly made to be a deceptive figure, just like in Norse mythology, while Luffy is known to be rather trusting of others, so this can't really end up well. Over in the Sun World, the rest of the Straw Hats make quick work of Rodo with a simple tree trap when Goldberg and Gerd catch up with him. Roto seems to also be a bit of a creep toward Gerd, perhaps even having feelings for her, as he refers to her in the same way that he refers to the live dolls that he captured. The two have no patience for him, however, and immediately knock him out with a combined attack. This seems to be a recurring technique with the Giants, as it is very reminiscent of the Hakoku sovereignty technique that we first saw used by Dory and Brogy back on Little Garden. We later on saw Oimo and Kashi perform a similar technique as well, albeit unnamed, during the Enies Lobby arc, and of course, Big Mom has a similar solo technique known as Ikoku sovereignty, and together with Kaido, they can perform the Conquest of the Sea technique, which also harkens back to the Giants' abilities. Pretty interesting stuff going on there. We learned that Elbaf formally has 3 levels: the Underworld, the Sun World, and the Astral World. So far, most of what we've seen in this arc has been happening on the Underworld, but in hindsight, we actually did get a glimpse of the Sun World back during Big Mom's flashback. Although it was taking place decades ago, you can spot some similar structures and geography from that village, including the hills in the background and this tower at the center. It's not totally clear if the castle over here is the same one that was referenced as where Loki was born, but either way, this is certainly a sight to take in. A whole civilization built atop a tree, and given how the Atom Tree was suggested to be effectively indestructible, it makes a lot of sense that the world government has not been able to overpower the Giants throughout history. Interestingly enough, it seems the tree has its own ecosystem, with the ability to grow grass, plants, and even other trees on top of it. Not only that, but the giant streams of water that we saw falling off the sides of the tree in previous chapters look to be from rivers and waterways that have been carved into the tree itself. Lots of cool stuff going on with this design. We also explicitly focus on Usopp and Luffy in the spread as they think back to their declaration of wanting to go to Elbaf that we saw over 1,000 chapters ago at this point. It's truly been an incredible journey, not just for the Straw Hats, but for us as well, as fans. To be able to finally see the fabled Elbaf before us is just outstanding. Now, the only layer that we have yet to see is the Astral World, which is the topmost part of the island. I had been wondering if there's anything up there since we first saw it, and given the name, I'd imagine it has something to do with their belief system, whether that be the true land of the gods, or perhaps some sort of nod to the Norse realm of the afterlife, Valhalla. Whatever it is, I'm excited to see where this all goes. The presence of Sky Islands here is very intriguing as well, since we've long been awaiting the reintroduction of Uruj in the story. The Giants having a great familiarity with Sky Islands, and potentially even Sky travel, was somewhat hinted at back during Egghead, when the Giant Warrior Pirates assumed that the rest of the Straw Hats were on a Sky Island. But there's been some thematic teases of this as well, what with the Giant Beanstalk on Skypiea. While this chapter has been absolutely incredible so far, perhaps the most interesting part of it is with the very last page, as we get the unexpected return of Louis Arnot and Bragmen. We were first introduced to this explorer way back at the start of the Little Garden arc, as Nami recalled reading about an island that matched the description of their surroundings. There, we saw the book Bragmen for the first time, where we got an account of Louis Arnot's travels to the island that he had dubbed Little Garden. Bragmen appeared in the series once again during the Ohara flashback, as it was one of the books that was preserved by their efforts. This was actually addressed in an SBS, where Oda suggested that it was the Oharans who allowed the book to survive into the present day. The book itself contains various stories about Arnot's journeys that seemed so wild, most readers rejected it as pure fiction. But we as real-life readers have had the privilege to watch these journeys unfold before our eyes for years and years, so we know that there is some truth to these accounts, and it's not unlikely that the Oharans also view the contents of the book to be meaningful enough to preserve. There's a lot of interesting stuff at play here for the Straw Hats. Of course, we have Usopp, who was known to exaggerate the truth himself. Nami, who has actually read Bragmen and likely has some more insight into the island than she realizes. And then there's Robin, who has a direct connection to the researchers of Ohara and Saul, who all work together to preserve this book. So I'm very excited to see where we go for these characters in particular. Now, I love when Oda gives us accounts of in-universe characters that we have not ever met, as it really makes the world feel bigger with its own history and notable figures. We used to get this fairly often back in the day with the likes of Willie Karen and Ju Wall, so it's really nice to see Louis Arnot back again. Now, as for the actual contents of the warning, this could go a lot of different ways. Of course, the most straightforward read is to just take it at face value and assume he's referring to the obvious danger of giant people and giant beasts in the face of regular people. But I've seen some people key into the temporal nature of his message, as if there's some time-related wackiness going on. And while I think most things are possible, I'm not entirely sure on that just yet at the moment. Whatever it is, I'm sure there's a darker side of Elbaf that we have yet to see, despite mostly just getting literal sunshine and rainbows in this chapter. here. I'm also incredibly intrigued by the silhouette at the end. Given the amigasa on his head and the hand holding up something to his mouth, it seems likely that this is the same silhouette we saw several chapters ago. Many fans speculated this to be the mysterious man who visited Crocus back during the Dexter World cover story, who fans have long been speculating as Shiki. I personally would love to see Shiki make his way into the main story, but I'm not certain that Oda is going to go that route, even though there are a lot of similarities here. And perhaps intentional, the flowers that we see in the foreground could be crocuses as well. I know people also speculate that person on the cover story to be Scalper Gaban, who now would have lighter hair due to age, totally possible. It would actually be a lot of fun though if this is Louis Arnot himself. We know that he had to have been alive within the last century, since he dubbed the island Little Garden based on the meeting with the giants, which would have been Dorian Broggie at the time. It's a little vague in the early Viz translation, but I believe in the original text it's more clear that he's referring to the giants and not just the dinosaurs on the island. Of course, there are a lot of possibilities as always, including characters we've never even met yet. Who knows, maybe this is actually the Ripley fellow that was mentioned at the start of the arc, or is this the mysterious man with a burn scar? Hopefully, we find out soon. Sorry for the quick breakdown this week, it's really been a busy weekend. Maybe we can go further into some of these things in the next chapter. Thank you so much for watching, stay safe, and I hope to see you in the next one.